This episode of Twice Removed is brought to you by 23andMe. As you might remember from science class, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes that make up your DNA. Well, that's where 23andMe, a genetic testing service, gets its name. 23andMe allows you to have access to information about your DNA. You can find out information about your ancestry, your health, even your physical traits. To learn more about your DNA, visit 23andme.com. That's the number 23andme.com.
One of my first memories is seeing American breakfast for the first time, and the breakfast here seems so gross.
Gross?
Yes, because like in Iran, we would eat fresh bread and feta cheese and tea, and here it was like my cousin's eating Fruity Pebbles. It's like pouring like primary colors into a bowl and then pouring milk on top and then eating it.
Who you are.
Biological family.
My dad's grandfather.
My ancestry.
My family.
Second cousin, twice removed.
Twice removed.
Twice removed.
Twice removed.
Don't worry, at least we all are together. Don't worry.
I'm AJ Jacobs, and this is Twice Removed, the show that proves we are, in fact, one big family. Right now, there are two people here with me in separate studios, and what they don't realize is they're related. One of these people is our mystery relative, who will be hidden away until the end of the show. The other is right here with me in our studio, our guest, Nazanin Rafsanjani. Hello, Nazanin.
Hello. Hello, AJ.
We are Nazanin. We are delighted to have you. People here in the Gimlet office, of course, know you very well. But why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the rest of the audience?
Yes, my name is Nazanin Rafsanjani. I'm the creative director at Gimlet. Gimlet is the company that makes this podcast. That means that I work on all the ads and branded content that we make.
Right. You are our advertising guru. You've also produced stories for This American Life, and you worked for The Rachel Maddow Show on MSNBC. You have a fascinating personal history and an amazing family. So we've been working for months to dig into that history.
Great.
Now, as we heard at the top of the show, you came to the U.S. from Iran as a kid. And because of that, you had to leave a lot of your family behind. So how much do you know about your family?
I don't know much about my family. Like, all I know are these like little snippets. I think one of the things that sometimes you give up when you immigrate here is all this stuff. Who were your grandparents' grandparents? What did they do? I don't know. We have like 5 family members in the United States, and that's who we're going to know about.
If you could have a fantasy of what your ancestors were like, what would you want them to be? Do you want them to be like, prince and princesses, or do you want them to be like gangsters? What would you like?
Oh my God, I haven't. I think I definitely would not want them to be princes and princesses. I can't believe I'm saying this. I don't know why I'm saying this, but like I would love to know if any of them were artistic, like painting or drawing or writing or anything like that. I just have questions more than fantasies of who I want them to be. Since I've had my own kids, I think it's really weird for me to have these totally American kids. They're just American. There's a part of me that wants them to have a connection to my whole family and like where I'm from. Or at least I want them to know that like the parts of my personality that I'm proud of come from some people they've never met.
Well, Nazanin, I couldn't have said it better myself. This idea that parts of who we are, parts of our experience, are wrapped up in family we've never even met, that's exactly what we found with your family. So here's how Twice Removed works. We've spent the last few months doing research, talking to historians, distant relatives, finding people who are related to you. If you look here, we built a roadmap, and it starts with you on one end. That's you over here.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends with your mystery relative.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And in between the two of you, there are 40 people related by blood or marriage. They're across generations, across borders. It's like 6 degrees of separation, only in this case, it's 40 degrees of separation. Now, in the course of the show, we're going to make our way through this roadmap, one person to the next. And along the way, we'll stop at 5 of your most interesting relatives, and we're going to tell their stories. With all of these people, one theme kept coming up: exile. People who have left their communities and had to start over. They are artists and dreamers. We'll meet a victim of one of the world's oldest diseases, and not just one, but 2 literary icons. And at the end of the show, after we've made our way through this roadmap, we're going to bring our mystery relative into the studio for a family reunion unlike any other.
Okay.
She says, laughing nervously. And what do you think? Do you have any idea who your mystery relative might be?
No, I have no idea. I mean, I'm just looking at this chart and like...
What about one guess? Give me one guess.
I mean, if Michelle Obama's in there, I would be psyched. And if she's not, I'll be really disappointed, so...
Okay. Now, mystery relative, I am talking to you. Hello. I can hear you, but Nazanin can't.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
Excellent. Is there anything you would like me to say to Nazanin for you?
Just that it is going to be absolutely wonderful to meet her.
Lovely. They say that it will be absolutely wonderful to meet you.
Okay. Yes, it will be wonderful to meet them.
All right, mystery relative, please hang tight. Soon you'll be in the studio with us, meeting Nazanin face to face. Hopefully the two of you will be filled with delight, though it could be abject horror. You never know. It's family. All right, so Nazanin, let's get started with your first story. Now, if you take a look at this roadmap here of your family, we actually don't have to go very far to get to your first remarkable relative.
Okay.
In fact, just one step.
Okay.
One step to the right.
Uh-huh.
Hello.
Hi, Nilu, it's AJ Jacobs.
Well,
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
my sister.
Your sister,
Yeah.
you recognized her.
Yes.
Her name, of course, is Nilufar. She goes by Nilu. She's about 5 years older than you.
Mm-hmm.
And the story of how you and Nilu came to America is pretty harrowing. And because Nilu is older than you, she has a more detailed memory of how drastically your life changed.
Yes, she knows more about that than me.
It all starts in the 1970s. Tehran was a city split between 2 cultures. You've got a modern Western capital, but one that is deeply steeped in the Islamic faith. In photos, it looks just like Los Angeles or Paris, with people walking down the street in business suits or bell-bottoms, but also hijabs. And in a lot of ways, Nilu's early years don't seem all that different from a kid growing up in the U.S.
I wanted to be a boxer
Really?
because I was obsessed with Rocky. At the time, it was like a big deal to get Western movies. You know, that was like a thing.
And did you ever train? Did you ever do a little Rocky, either running upstairs or
Oh, all the time. Like when I was by myself, I used to pretend I was Rocky all the time. I would shadow box and do push-ups and that kind of thing. I was always kind of embarrassed by it. So it wasn't, I always made sure no one knew I was playing Rocky.
Right.
Man, did I love Rocky.
My favorite movie was Sabrina.
Ah,
Yeah, with Audrey Hepburn. I couldn't get enough.
you know what? That is my father's favorite movie, and I was going to be named Sabrina if I were a girl.
Really?
Yeah. So, Nazanin, you want to tell us who this is?
That is my mom. I mean, she'll watch anything, so just take that all with a grain of salt.
It's a good movie.
It is a good movie.
Not the remake. But...
No. Yeah, the Audrey Hepburn version.
So that is your mother, Mina Attar. Now, during this, there was actually a massive political shift happening right outside your home in the streets of Tehran.
At dusk last night, there were fires burning and roads blocked. This was the scene all over Tehran. It was the beginning of a night of violence that followed a day of violence.
In 1979, there were two sides struggling for control of Iran. On one side, the Shah, who was aligned with the West but also very corrupt and unpopular in his own country. On the other side was the Ayatollah Khomeini, a religious hardliner. Now, in that year, revolution broke out and the balance of power shifted away from the Shah and toward the Ayatollah.
Ayatollah Khomeini, the winner. He now controls Iran, the oil, the money, the government, billions in military equipment bought by the Shah. He has it all.
And with that power, Khomeini started instituting harsher laws.
The year that I got pregnant by Nazanin was a year that they forbidden everything, alcohol and Western movie, and they put a hijab in a woman's head.
My least favorite part, which I absolutely hated, was this thing they call the marna'e, which is like a lycra almost fabric that would cover your hair. I hated that. And I just didn't understand why the boys didn't have to wear that, and I did. And I would get in trouble.
She would get so mad. she would argue. Yeah.
And the head covering was just one of the new requirements under the Ayatollah. There were restrictions on where women could travel, what jobs they could do. The way your mom tells it, Nazanin, it was overwhelming.
Everything was tighter and tighter and harder to breathe for women. It was horrible, horrible. They take your identity. They take everything, who you are, what you think. It's feel like you're trapped. You're in a wheel that you just keep screaming, and nobody hears you.
Are you all right?
Yeah. It's hard to hear your mom cry.
September 21st, 1980. Does that date ring a bell?
Yes, that is my birthday.
That's right.
Yes.
Now, by then, the revolution was about 2 years in. And literally, the very next day, war broke out in Iran. And soon, life in Tehran would go from oppressive to outright dangerous.
Good evening. In the Middle East, Iraq's border troubles with Iran exploded into fighting today that had all the appearances of a war.
The Iran-Iraq War, it started as a border dispute, but it quickly escalated. Saddam Hussein started flying planes hundreds of miles into Iran and dropped bombs on the capital, Tehran, where you lived.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember anything about the bombings?
I didn't know they were bombings until later. I remember being woken up in the middle of the night and being shuffled down to our basement and not knowing why.
We actually talked to your mom and sister about it, and they remember, of course, very clearly. On any given night, bombs would start falling on your neighborhood, and your mom would have to react fast.
We all wake up. I grab Nazanin, just put the blanket, and Nazanin try not to fall. And my husband get another blanket and grab Nilufar. Nilufar was 6 years old, 7 years old then. Then we go in a hole in the wall or somewhere we think is safe. We go and we shiver, literally shiver for all the time that the bombing continues.
What did you say to your daughters at that point?
In fact, I'm so wimpy that I just shiver and cry. Nazanin was just the infant, but Nilufar was the bravest.
She would be crying, and my grandma would be crying, my sister would be crying, and I would be the one, comforting everyone.
She would tell me, don't worry, at least we all are together. Don't worry.
Wow. That's amazing.
I kind of remember liking it almost. It almost kind of felt like a slumber party.
That's so funny.
What's funny?
Yeah, I mean, she really experienced these things, where I have like snippets of a memory. Almost looks like you looked at a picture and you're just remembering the picture.
Yeah, and the bombings were basically the last straw for your mom. She said, enough. We need to leave. The first step was for your mom to quit her job without looking suspicious. She was worried her boss at the time would turn her in.
I put my resignation and he said, no, where are you going? I said, my husband didn't let me to work anymore. He said, oh, okay.
That makes sense.
And he said, yeah, my sister, you have to look after your husband first. I said, yeah, right.
Yeah, that is absolutely her character.
That sums it up.
Yeah.
So that was the easy part. But your parents actually had to get your family out. Your mom made a plan. She'd line up at 4 a.m. to get travel visas. And she had to get there super early to beat the crowds. The whole family would then fly to Turkey. And from Turkey, you would catch a plane to Minnesota, where 2 of your uncles already lived. The day comes. You all go to the airport. Your mom and dad say goodbye to their families. The plane takes off. And the emotions were complicated. Your mom, she was sad to leave her life behind, but at the same time, it was also a relief.
We are still in a Iranian territory. You have to keep the hijab. As soon as we flew over Iran's border, I remember Nilufar was the first one. She was 9 years old. She said, no power puts this hijab on my head ever again. All the women cheers and they take the hijab and they clap. And I took it off. I said, no matter what it takes, I'm going to make it. I'm not gonna do this anymore. It's just enough is enough. I have only one life to live. They have no control.
The plane touched down in Minnesota. Now, your family, they were only here on a travel visa. So, like a lot of immigrants, your mom had to work under the table. And she worked a lot.
I worked at night cleaning offices. One of them was Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh, really?
I said, oh my God, how many tables do they have?
I did not know she worked at Chuck E. Cheese. It's like my kid's favorite place now. If she still worked there, they'd be so psyched. Seriously. All my kids ever want my parents to do is take them to Chuck E. Cheese.
Do you think maybe that's why she doesn't take her?
I don't know. Or because it's awful, but like, yeah. I don't know.
While Mina worked nights as a cleaner just to make ends meet, Nilu was focused on trying to fit in.
I remember feeling very defensive. I think I went up to sharpen a pencil and some kid was like, tried to teach me how to like use the pencil sharpener. And I was really offended. I was like, I may not speak the language, but I know what a pencil sharpener is. Like, we have pencil sharpeners in Iran, you know? You just want to not be different when you're that age.
Oh.
We were just so different. Everything about us was different. There was just this, like, overwhelming sense of, like, I don't belong anywhere.
Yeah, like, I hated it. I felt so weird. I mean, every kid does, I think, but we were weird. You know, all the houses had Christmas lights. Everyone had a Christmas tree. Everyone was named Lindsay, you know? That's how it felt. There were a lot of Lindsays. The most popular girl at our bus stop, her name was Lindsay. It felt really isolating.
And what about your parents? I mean, your mom, she didn't seem to have the same experience because she was so busy working.
I never thought about how hard they were working, ever. Such a, selfish little kid.
Was there a moment when you got older that you were like, oh my God, I can't believe the sacrifices they made?
Yeah. Yes. I have those moments I think about that all the time now. I think about it all the time. I can't imagine making the decisions that they made. My dad said goodbye to every member of his family, everybody. My parents, they worked 6 days a week. They were just never around. And as a kid, I would get mad about it. Or I wanted them to especially my mom, I wanted her to be volunteering and doing all the things. Or having her nails perfectly done, because that's how the moms of my friends were like. I never thought about how I never thought about how it must have been beyond just all the leaving your family behind and all that stuff, how it must have been just painful for them never to see us. Yeah. And then now my mom is always trying to convince me to be a stay-at-home mom, and I always yell at her. But she's always like, you're going to regret not seeing the kids. I mean, I feel like I won the lottery for all the things that we've given up as a family, and my parents especially. Literally, I feel like the life that I have now is equivalent to having won the lottery when I was 6.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, your family's history with one of the oldest diseases known to mankind. And we'll start to make our way toward your mystery relative.
Okay.
Squarespace, they'll help you make a website.
So here's a question. Do you have a homepage for you or for your work? If not, our sponsor Squarespace can help. One thing I like about Squarespace is that they make it so easy to purchase a domain when you set up your site. Plus, they make it really easy to think outside the .com. They offer over 200 top-level domains, or TLDs, as they say, which means that I could have my website called ajjacobs.pizza, or .kiwi if I want to be healthier, or .holidays if you want to be seasonal. There's .love if you want to be sweet, or .ninja if you want to be tough. Choosing your favorite TLD may be the most challenging part about building your website, because once that's done, you simply choose from one of their designer templates, customize it, and publish. No coding required. To get started on your Squarespace website, online store, blog, or website today, visit squarespace.com and use promo code TWICEREMOVED for 10% off your purchase. That's squarespace.com, promo code TWICEREMOVED for 10% off. Squarespace. Make it beautiful.
Squarespace.
Welcome back to Twice Removed, the show that proves we are, in fact, one big family. I'm here with Nazanin Rafsanjani, my co-worker here at Gimlet. We just heard about how her family immigrated from Tehran to the U.S. when she was a kid. Nazanin, are you ready to get back on this road to your mystery relative?
Yes, I am.
Let's do it. Next stop, we're staying in Tehran. For a story that's not about coming to a new country. It's about what gets left behind. Take a look at this map again. We're going to go 1, 2, 3 steps from your sister Nilu.
الو
الو سلام خوب هستین؟ سلام
متشکر
عصرتون بخیر.
So, we called up your great aunt.
Uh-huh.
You look a little emotional.
I know. We call her Khalajun, which means dear aunt.
Others call her Afat. That's her name. She speaks a little English, but mostly Farsi, so we had a translator come to help us out.
گفتن که خیلی خیلی خوشحال میشدن اگر که میتونستن بیان منزلتون. هیچ نگفتین. بله اطلاع نداره.
Does that mean okay? Bale?
Yes, that means okay.
I feel like I got it. I'm almost fluent.
That's brave. That's a brave effort.
That's my Farsi. You'll have to teach me later. Afat remembers the day your family left Tehran. She met you at the airport to say goodbye, and she says it was one of the saddest days of her life.
اینکه خلاصه متوجه شدیم و بر رفتن مینا همه چیز برامون مشکل بود تا شبی که مینا.
Nazanin.
Yeah.
What did she say?
She said that every single thing about my mom leaving Iran was incredibly difficult for her, down to the last moment when I could be translating this better. But at the moment when my mom let go of my great aunt at the airport, it felt like she was taking a piece of her life away.
But your mom and Afat, they're still in touch, right? They're still close?
Yes. She's just like a force of nature. She was a principal in Iran for a school for the blind for many, many, many years. She had a bunch of brothers and a dad who weren't particularly interested in having her be educated. And she made that happen for herself. And she's just a good person.
Yeah. Afat is sort of the external hard drive of your mother's family, the memory keeper. And that's especially important in a country like Iran. People like Afat, who have lived there for many decades, they can be the best and sometimes the only link to the past. So we asked Afat about some of your more distant ancestors. She started with her father, Haji Ghanay, who is your great-grandfather. Haji was born in 1892. Afat describes him as a difficult man, a tough father.
Somewhat dictatorial in the way that I think he ran things.
But she does remember something special about him, his love of poetry. So, Naz, you were hoping to learn if you had any artists in the family. Turns out there was one not too far away, your great-grandfather. He would write poetry, he would sing it, he would memorize his favorite poets.
And expected everyone to also know these words and to have an appreciation for these things, especially Sa'di.
Sa'di is a major figure in classical poetry. He's sort of the Persian Shakespeare, only he lived 350 years before Shakespeare.
Did your father make you memorize those poems? And if so, do you remember any of them?
Some of them, a little bit.
جوانی سر از رأی مادر بتافت دل دردمندش به آذر بتافت چو بیچاره شد پیشش آورد مه که ای خوب شهر فراموشه تو آنی که از یک مگس رنجه ای که امروز سالار و سرپنجه ای.
Wow. First of all, I am just astounded that you still remember that. Just amazing.
Bale.
Were you able to understand that poem at all?
I can understand a little bit, but it's it is kind of like listening to Shakespeare when you...
What little bit did you understand?
Something about the youth or children to a mother.
Exactly.
But that's it.
I didn't understand it either, but it was translated. And it's the voice of a mother who is disappointed in her son's behavior. So there you go, Nazanin. You have a deep love of the arts baked into your genes. Now, something else came up in our conversation with Afat that surprised us. It took us back 100 years. You see, for most of Iranian history, people didn't have formal last names. At least not in the way we think of them. But in the 1920s, the Shah decided it was time for the country to westernize. And one of the first things he did was give everyone a formal last name. That single decision makes it hard to research any Iranian family. Because 100 years ago, it's likely they had a totally different last name. A perfect example of how confusing this can be is Afat's last name, Ghanay.
هر 4 تا برادر و یه تعداد 5 تا خواهرن. همه تو امریکا.
پس فامیل شما فامیل پدرتون دانشمند بوده.
اول دانشمند بوده، پدرم رفته قانعی کرده.
اوکی.
پدر بزرگم هم دانشمند بوده.
بله. So her father actually changed his last name from Danishmand, which means knowledgeable, to Qanai. He just thought the name didn't fit.
That's very humble of him to change the name. What does the new name mean?
It's also a very humble last name. It means whatever God has given you, you should not ask for more. You should be happy with what he has given you.
Did you know that your great-grandpa had changed his name?
No, I had no idea their last name was made up. And I feel this weird sense of relief that he didn't change his name to awesome superstar or something, I was saying I want my kids to know that the parts of me that I'm most proud of come from people they've never met. I think Khalajun is the main person. She's just poised and brave and strong. I don't think without her influence would my mom have ever had the courage to leave Iran. Ever.
Okay, Nazanin, we're moving on to your next relative.
Okay.
Our next story, it's about the battle to stop one of the oldest diseases in the world and how that battle changed modern science. Okay, so let's go back to the map here. You see a Fad. Now we're going to take 4 steps to the right to get to your cousin Saeed and his wife Casey.
Mm-hmm.
And you know them, right? You know Saeed and Casey pretty well.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do.
When was the last time you saw them?
My last time seeing them was last year in Minnesota for my grandfather's 90th birthday, which was the first time I had seen them in a long time.
Now, you probably don't know this, but Casey's grandfather was one of 17 children. Arnold, Billy, Pierce, Malcolm, John Burnham, Annie Mae, Mattie Lou, Cecil, Macklin, Huey, Hosey, Herschel, James, Howard, Hubert, Andrew, and Leona Turner.
It's insane.
14 Turner boys and 3 Turner girls. And we're going to focus on just one of them for this story, John Burnham, or JB. Like you and your family, JB had to leave his home, though his exile wasn't political, it was physical.
I can just remember us coming in, I guess from outside playing, and he was coughing up blood.
This is Tava McWhorter. She's JB's niece.
And Mother was running to the telephone. Daddy came home early the next day and took JB to the doctor. And then found out that he had TB.
TB, or tuberculosis. It's among the oldest infectious diseases known to humans. It's been killing us since the Stone Age, literally. And by 1800, tuberculosis had killed 1 in 7 people who had ever lived.
Huh.
Yeah, just a crazy statistic. Living and dying with TB was a fact of life for nearly all of human history. So when JV heard the diagnosis, he knew what it meant. Back then, getting TB was basically a death sentence. But today, that's no longer the case, at least not in the United States. And that shift is one of the greatest public health triumphs in history.
Once it was a hopeless curse, but now, thanks to our knowledge, it can be brought under control.
This is a newsreel from 1937. See, the big reason that TB was so rampant is that people had no idea where it came from. Most people thought it was hereditary, or that it came from dirty air or water. Nobody thought TB was something that we could pass on to each other. So, Nazanin, would you mind trying an experiment with me?
No.
I like your willingness. Okay, so I have some delicious ice cream, some Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and I'm going to take a big bite of it. Okay, now, here, you have some. With the same spoon that I just used. I only have 1 spoon.
I know.
I should mention that 15 or 20 other people have also licked this spoon before I did, and I have no idea who they are or where they've been.
Right.
But have a taste.
Thank you. But no, thank you.
You're going to pass?
I'm going to pass. Yes, thank you. I know.
You're lost. All right. So obviously, yes, a little gross, a lot gross, but it was actually a thing. People used to pay a penny for tastes of ice cream out of these little glasses. They were called penny licks.
Oh, Jesus. That's horrible.
It was like all of Lower Manhattan sharing one sample spoon.
Wow. God. It's like licking the subway pole or something.
It is
It's
totally.
like paying to lick the subway pole.
But just a penny.
Gah.
There's a reason you think this is gross. In 1882, a German scientist discovered the bacterium that causes TB. This was a big deal, not just for how we understood TB, but for how we understood all infectious diseases. Back then, people were just coming around to the idea that germs were a real thing. And this TB bacterium, this was proof.
Tuberculosis is caused by a germ so small thousands could pass through a pinhole without crowding.
This new discovery led to a revolutionary new idea that disease could be fought with awareness. Organizations popped up to get the word out. They made newsreels, handed out pamphlets at schools and offices. They encouraged basic sanitary practices like washing your hands and using your tissues, things that seem so obvious to us now. And TB infection rates went down. On the face of it, all this worked. But there was an unintended consequence. We became scared of each other. People with suspicious coughs were evicted from their homes and refused jobs. Their names were made public. And finally, people with TB were quarantined. And that's what happened to your relative, JB. After he got his diagnosis, JB was put away.
He stayed with us for about a week while they found him a place, the sanitarium for TB patients.
Sanatorium. A sanatorium was a place where people with tuberculosis could be treated long-term. A place where they could get fresh air, good nutrition, and rest. Lots of rest. And these sanatoria, they were everywhere. Hundreds of them all across the United States. 3 miles away from where you got married in the Catskills, there was one there, Ulster County Tuberculosis Sanatorium. And if you walk about a mile east from where we're sitting right here at Gimlet Studios, there's another one. So on one level, sanatoria were a way of curing patients. But on another, they were a convenient way to get the infected people out of the community.
He had to go in this hospital and, he was put in this room and he wasn't allowed to associate with anyone else. You don't have a whole lot of human contact unless someone comes to see you, and not too many people would want to come see you. Kind of like you're waiting to die.
Tava described it as a prison for sick people, and it kind of was. People would hold their breath as they drove by. Some patients had their belongings and houses burned. People went in there and they were forgotten about. But JB's family, they made sure that never happened to him.
My dad would go in to see his brother, and he would tell him that we were outside playing in the yard, and he would just come to the window and wave at us. It had to be heartbreaking for him to know that, that he'd never be outside again.
JB spent a year in the sanatorium, but he wasn't getting any better. So he volunteered for a surgery that was so experimental, half of the patients died.
Because if they could do something to cure him or make him better, he wanted to try it because, he couldn't go anywhere. He couldn't do anything. He didn't have a life.
Sadly, JB died in surgery. He was 34 years old. It was 1957 when JB died. Around that time, the U.S. finally got tuberculosis under control, which meant that the old sanatoria, they weren't really needed anymore. They turned into schools, resorts, assisted living facilities. The one near Gimlet, it's now a fancy apartment building. Places that were used to keep people away from the community, they have now become places for people to gather. Did you know anything about this?
No, I didn't know anything about this. That sounds horrible, to be sort of like isolated in that way. Like, I can't believe that someone who was having that experience in the United States is tied to me in any way. You know what I mean?
Okay, Naz, I'm just going to check in real quick with our mystery relative, so sit tight. Mystery relative, I wanted to say hi because you have quite a connection to this chapter of history. There was a sanatorium near your house.
Yeah. The one near my house was called Nopeming, and it's long gone now. I mean, you just knew that you didn't go near there. You'd drive by it and you knew there was the Nopeming facility and there were people with tuberculosis in there, and if you went near it, you were going to get it. The belief was you were just going to die. You didn't want to get close to it.
But did you ever get close to it?
My dad did a lot of he helped a lot of people. And I remember going to the Nopeming sanatorium with him. He said, "You stay in the car, I don't want you exposed." He went in, he came out, and I did later test positive for exposure. That's when my mother went ballistic. But I was put on a course of antibiotics and I've never had trouble with it.
All right, mystery relative, we'll be back to you in just a few minutes. Please sit tight. How you feeling, Naz?
I'm feeling okay. How are you guys?
I'm excited.
Okay, good.
Are you nervous? You curious?
I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious.
Curious is good. I am very excited about our next stop. It's a relative who is deeply connected to the arts. He's 18 steps away from J.B. Turner, and he's more than half our way to your mystery relative. He's in Massachusetts, 1803. He's someone I'm pretty sure you've heard of, but maybe someone you didn't think of as family. His name? Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Okay, that is so weird.
Cousin Ralph.
Yeah, Cousin Ralph. Yes, I know who that is.
Well, for those who are maybe only vaguely familiar, he's often considered the father of American literature. He's a poet and an essayist. He's most famous for an essay called Self-Reliance. But in our research, we heard this story that totally changed how we thought about Emerson and his influence on American culture. In the early part of his life, Emerson was a Unitarian minister. But in 1832, he quits. He leaves the clergy, and he's not sure what to do with himself.
He's a little bit adrift.
This is Jeffrey Einboden, an Emerson scholar at Northern Illinois University. And he says that Emerson did what lots of upper-class 20-somethings do when they're out of work, when they're trying to figure things out. He went to Europe.
When he makes his way up through Italy and France and then eventually to Britain.
While Emerson's in Britain, he goes to meet a hero of his, the famous poet Samuel Coleridge. He goes over to Coleridge's house, walks up the front stairs.
And when Emerson climbs the stairs to go see Coleridge, I think he's expecting to see this great romantic master. And instead, Coleridge is only about a year away from death. So he's in a kind of state of illness and repose.
But all is not lost. On that same trip to England, Emerson came across another piece of literature that was arguably as influential on him as Coleridge's. Wandering through the streets of London, he ducked into a small bookstore. And while he was pacing through, one particular volume caught his eye. He wrote about it in his journal.
He writes that he's bought a copy of the Quran, so the Muslim scripture, and what we might assume is an English copy of the Quran, and that he eventually, we believe, takes home with him to New England.
He bought a Quran for 2 pence 6 shilling. Remember that, when you could get a book for 2 pence? Good days. But it's at this moment that Emerson, the father of American literature, engages with a great Western influence, Coleridge, and at the same time engages with a great Eastern influence, Islam. See, while Emerson is well known for his writing on nature and self-reliance, he also wrote extensively about Persian poetry. And Nazanin, this is how the lives of your ancestors in Tehran intersect with that of your distant relative in Massachusetts, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Remember that poem that your great aunt recited earlier in the show?
جوانی سر از رأی مادر بتافت دل دردمندش به آذر بتافت.
That poem was written by the Persian poet Sadi. In 1842, Ralph Waldo Emerson published one of his first major poems. It was called Sadi. In it, he takes on the name and voice of the Persian icon. It turns out Emerson was studying Sadi just a few years before your great-grandfather was born in Tehran.
Huh.
Sadi and the other Persian poets had an enormous impact on Emerson. He translated more than 2,000 lines of Persian poetry. He quoted them everywhere, in letters to friends, on the backs of envelopes. It's all over his personal journals. In the 1850s, one poet referred to Emerson as our Concord Sadi, as in Concord, Massachusetts, where Emerson lived. He said Emerson was, quote, responding from today in America, over the ages and the sea, to the dead lyrist of Persia.
In some ways, Emerson, he influenced a whole generation coming after him. Whitman, as well as Emily Dickinson. Emerson also really heavily influenced Henry David Thoreau.
Einboden calls this literary genealogy, the act of tying people and cultures together across borders, across languages, across time, by tracing their common influences like Sadi. Emerson ends his essay, Persian Poetry, with a poem by Kermani. He's another Persian great, and it's a poem about nostalgia for a former homeland. It reads in part, "Except the amber morning wind, not one salutes me here. There is no lover in all Baghdad to offer the exile cheer." That poem is called The Exile.
That's beautiful. It makes me think of my parents. It just made me think about how it must have been for them. It was easy for me to blend in, but for my parents, it's very lonely. I think when you leave your country at that age, like my dad was 40, my mom was 30, you're just not comfortable anymore, in space.
It just doesn't come naturally.
Nothing comes naturally.
We'll be back with our mystery relative right after this break.
And me, spit into a tube and see.
This episode of Twice Removed is brought to you by 23andMe. Did you know that genetically, we're all 99.5% the same? Wouldn't you like to know more about what's in that 0.5%? With 23andMe, you can. 23andMe gets its name from the 23 pairs of chromosomes that make up your DNA. And those chromosome pairs contain a lot of information, like where in the world you came from. You can even see how DNA affects your likelihood to consume more caffeine or be a deep sleeper. So, how does 23andMe work? You simply purchase a kit on their website, 23andme.com. When the test arrives, you provide a saliva sample by spitting into a tube. The best part, once your DNA has been analyzed, you'll get to learn more about what makes you, you. To order your kit today, visit 23andme.com. That's the number 23, ANDME.com.
23andme.
Welcome back to Twice Removed. Nazanin, we have made it. We are at our final stop before your mystery relative. And it's been quite a journey to get here. We've been to Tehran, to Alabama, to a bookstore in London. But here we are, minutes away from meeting your mystery relative. So, how you doing?
I don't know. I'm sweaty. I'm nervous. I am. I'm nervous. My palms are sweaty.
Yeah. Nazanin, we started out with a story of how your family came to this country. So, for our last story, we thought we'd tell you how your mystery relative got here. And it's from a very small part of the world in the 19 teens. And we land on a woman named Adelaide Lima Teixeira. Okay, real quick here, I want to check in with our mystery guest. Mystery guest, does the name Adelaide Lima Teixeira ring a bell?
Yes, it does. She's my grandmother.
Uh-huh. And what do you know about her?
She was born in the Azores, I think on San Miguel Island, and came here with her first husband.
Well, we've got a little more detail, so hang tight. We'll be right back. Nazanin, since you couldn't hear that, Adelaide is our mystery guest's grandmother.
Oh.
Super close.
Okay.
Okay?
Very exciting.
So to learn more about Adelaide, we talked to another one of her granddaughters, Fran Connors.
I remember her as kind of short, kind of stocky lady. Always remember her with gray hair, usually pulled back in a bun, and always in black clothing.
Adelaide was born in 1891 on São Miguel. It's a remote Portuguese island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's part of a chain of islands called the Azores. And even though São Miguel is incredibly lush, the people there call it the Green Island. There's not a whole lot of opportunity. And so at 23 years old, Adelaide and her husband Jacinto gathered up their 3 kids, got on a boat, and left for a small town unknown to most of the world, Fall River, Massachusetts. Fall River was called the most Portuguese city in America. It was filled with people who had left São Miguel. The backbone of the town was its cotton mills. Spindle City, they called it. They were hard jobs, but good jobs. And jobs were the key. Most people coming over, like Adelaide, didn't have much.
Well, she brought all of her possessions in steamer trunks. I know at least one because I have it now.
But Adelaide and Jacinto's new life in America, it lasted just 19 days.
Her husband died. My father said he contracted some kind of nasty thing, and that's what he died of. So she came to a new country with 3 young children and lost her husband. That must have been very frightening. I think she had to be a pretty strong-willed woman to survive that, being a young mother and a young widow.
Now remember, Nazanin, at the very beginning of our show, you said that you wanted your kids to know that there are parts of your personality that come from people they've never even met. Things like your great aunt's kindness and strength. Well, those are the same sorts of things that Fran remembers about Adelaide. More than dates and details, it's Adelaide's personality that is passed down through the generations.
Mm-hmm.
Her strong will.
When she was bedridden, I used to go in the room and sit with her. I had to have been maybe 7 years old. And she did actually teach me how to crochet. I made one long strand of crocheted yarn. And then I didn't know what to do with it. And she said, let's take that. And she tied it to the foot of the hospital bed, which it was iron railings. And when she wanted to sit up, she would pull on that to help pull herself up in the bed. So that just came back to me when we were talking about her. So maybe I got some of that strength and gumption from her. I don't know.
It's through memories like this that Fran understands herself. And I imagine that's also true of your mystery relative, who is Adelaide's other granddaughter. Do you want to meet Adelaide's granddaughter, your mystery relative?
Yes. Yes, I do.
All right, mystery relative, come on in.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
So here is your mystery relative.
Hi.
Do you have any idea who this is?
I do not.
Can I give you some clues?
Yes.
Okay. You met in Minnesota.
We did?
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
It's been 30 years since you last saw her.
Okay.
You might not be in America if it weren't for her.
Are you Pat?
Yes.
Oh my God. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
They are hugging people.
Oh, I can't. Oh, hi.
That was a good long hug.
Yeah. Well, I can tell people who she is. Pat is the lawyer who helped us stay in the country.
So, Pat, how long has it been since you've seen Nazanin?
It's been about 30 years.
30
I mean, she
years.
was just a little girl last time I saw her.
My memory of you is like you had like a 80s hairstyle and you had like blue eyeliner and you just seemed like so in charge. Because I think one of the things that happens is that like your parents, who are like the people who always used to know what was going on, like they did not know what was going on anymore. And like you were a person who was like gonna make it okay, which in those days was a rare feeling. It was hard to know who to trust and it was scary. And you're definitely like a person who I've always like been grateful for. I would never assume that you like would remember us or my family at all.
Oh, yeah. I just remember this wonderful family with these two wonderful little girls who just so desperately needed to stay here.
Were we a special case? Was that your work?
That was my work, and it still is.
It still is.
Yeah.
Is to help refugees stay in the country.
Yes.
So, Pat, can you tell us just a little more about what you did for Naz's family? Like, how did they come to you? What did you do for them?
I'll say I think they came to me through other clients because I was representing an awful lot of Iranians at the time. And so what they really had to do was sit down and talk about what had happened and what would happen if they went back.
And what would happen?
Well, in particular, I think the focus was on Mina, on your mom, and on what would happen to Iranian women who simply could not live under the restrictions that the Islamic Republic had put on them.
Like what would happen if a woman didn't wear a hijab?
You could be arrested on the street. You could be thrown in prison. I think there was, at that time, even throwing acid on women's faces if they did not wear it correctly. It was horrific. And we had to get the U.S. government to actually recognize women as what's called a particular social group. Because at the time they said, well, no, there's too many Iranian women. Well, we managed to narrow it to Iranian women who oppose the Islamic Republic. And what I've always said to people is anyone who thinks that Iranian women are not strong has never met an Iranian woman, because these were women who were protecting their families by any means necessary. You probably remember sitting in the waiting room at immigration.
Yeah.
And we all had to sit through that and to tell the officer what was happening in Iran and why they couldn't go back.
How much was riding on those meetings? What was at stake?
Their lives were at stake. If they went back to Iran, the chances that they would all survive, I thought, was pretty slim. Not only because of the war, but because of the political issues, because of Mina's objection to everything that was happening to women in Iran. Somebody, probably Mina, was going to end up in prison. Ending up in prison, there was a high probability she would end up dead. And it was literally life and death.
And what Pat's saying, it certainly is like, I mean, my mom or my sister, little girl who wants to be a boxer, like that's, it's hard for that person to grow up in Iran, I think. It's strange it's strange because you did this for us and like changed our whole, like just changed our entire lives. And then, then we don't see each other for 30 years. It's just like it's like not an exaggeration to say that like I wouldn't have any of the things that I have if you hadn't helped us.
Pat, how many people have you helped over the years?
Well, if you'd like to know how many closed files I have, 3,000.
3,000 people in America.
And that's families. So there's more in most of those files than just one person. When I look at the number, I go, who did this? I mean, it just doesn't seem like it's been that long and that many people. But it does feel like I've lived what my mother taught me to live, which is you never, ever turn your back if you can possibly help it. Because if you do, worse things will happen.
When you're a kid, like people are protecting you and you don't even know. That's Pat, like for me and my family. like there are these people in my life who like my great aunt and who I think about, and I think like that's a person who's like made this huge impact on me, who I haven't seen for 30 years. And you're like that. You are this person who changed my life.
Thank you so much for being here. And any parting words? Well, they're not parting forever, you know. I don't want to make... You guys can hang out as long as you want.
Any parting words for the purposes of this podcast?
That's right.
Yeah. You know, I think I'm a little bit overwhelmed in terms of any parting words. Because when people move on, they're moving on with their lives, and I don't see what happens 30 years down the road, how, you know, what someone has done with their life, that they've now got a family, that, you know, it leaves you saying, well, you did something good. And I'm really proud of you, and I'm proud of what you've done.
Thank you. I think it's just like, thank you. Like, thank you for not just everything you've done for my family, but like, thank you for like doing this for other people. I don't know. I hope you know. I think you do, but I just like really hope you know what you're doing for people, you know. But really, thank you is the parting words.
Twice Removed is produced by Meg Driscoll, Gofen Mputubuele, Matthew Nelson, Audrey Quinn, and Kimmy Regler. Our senior producer is Eric Mennel. Editing by Jorge Just and Alex Bloomberg. Michelle Harris is our fact checker. Research and genealogy by J. Mark Lowe and Eowyn Langhoff. Music and sound design by Haley Shaw. Interpreting and translations by Raha Hakim Davar and Sarah Gudarzi. Additional music by Blue Note Sessions. Special thanks this week to Casey Turner, Loretta Shugru, Sarah Rodriguez, Suzanne Campbell, and the West Texas Collection at San Angelo State University, Vicki Webb, Dr. Frank Sousa, Heather Wiley, Brad Mosley and the American School for the Deaf, Dr. Amy Malik, Kodadad Reza Kahani, and the band Lowland Hum. Jeffrey Einboden's new book, which talks about Emerson and his Persian influences, is The Islamic Lineage of American Literary Culture. You can reach us at twiceremoved@gimletmedia.com. We tweet at Twice Removed, and we're also on Facebook. Twice Removed is a production of Gimlet Media. I'm AJ Jacobs, and we'll be back next week with more Twice Removed. Hopefully you'll be filled with delight, or perhaps abject horror. You never know. It's family. Thanks to our sponsor, Squarespace. To get started on your online store, blog, or website today, visit squarespace.com and use promo code TWICEREMOVED for 10% off your purchase. That's squarespace.com, promo code TWICEREMOVed for 10% off. Squarespace. Make your next move. Special thanks this week to Family Tree Magazine. With Family Tree Magazine, you can unlock exciting discoveries about your own family tree. How? The editors of Family Tree Magazine can walk you through 48 secrets to searching for your roots online. Get started now and download their free ebook at familytreemagazine.com/ancestry. That's familytreemagazine.com/ancestry.